وأفرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بجنايتها، ومطالي يا سيدي. فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملت في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي، ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي، وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك، أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا، مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا. لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري، وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري، وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، ورقة جلدي، ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالفي برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد ما انطوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا، وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة. وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك. وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي، فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأذجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاك تعمى ضابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تولمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ كيف يهرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوتا وترى مكانا؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأن تجل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتتولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وخلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملت، كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرت، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطاء تستر، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا، وأعمالي عندك مقبولا، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا، يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جواري، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبارزين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء. يا سابق النعم يا دافع النقام، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. سورة مباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن عليا ولي الله وأشهد أن عليا حجة الله صلوات وسلامه عليه حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه الله أكبر أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصلي لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع له لمن حمد الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم رب اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم اللهم ارزقنا شفاعة الحسين يوم الورود وزيارة الحسين إلى يوم القيامة الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله وخير الأسماء الحسنى لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم تسبيح فاطمة لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم 2 فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen in Kul Arwah al-Mu'mineen wal-Mu'minat, Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat Yama Yujibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. Amma yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward and recite tonight's matlis per Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. بسم الله. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, for tonight, we'll be starting off with, there's I think 2 Slido questions from when I last checked, and these are coming from when we had left off, before the month of Ramadan. Then we'll move on and continue our topic about Mahdawiyah, as we had done before Ramadan. And then inshallah, we'll recite a few words of musibah for the sake of the beloved soul of Marhuma, Zainab, Anna, Irina, Kaki. So the first question is, Assalamu alaikum, alaikum salam. In your majlis, you mentioned that namaz is sufficient enough. Can you please clarify this? I can do anything I want, but make sure I pray. That should be enough. So if you remember, one of the ahadith that we had mentioned, it came from, I believe if I'm not mistaken, our 5th Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Which, if I remember correctly, it says that the first thing that an abd is going to be accounted for on the Day of Judgment is their salah. أَوَّلَ مَا يُحَاسُبُ الْعَبْدُ بِهِ الصَّلَاةِ. The first thing that we will be taken into account for is our salah. فَإِنْ قُبِلَتْ قُبِلَ مَا سَوَاهَا. If that salah is accepted, everything else is accepted as well. وَإِنْ رُدَّتْ رُدَّ مَا سَوَاهَا. But if the salah, namaz, is rejected by Allah, then everything else will be rejected as well. Now, we didn't get a chance to really open this up, but it's possible that somebody, because sometimes we, like to read into these ahadith, take them out of context, and, just pick out points that only support what we have in our minds, right? Somebody may have heard that and thought that, if I just make sure my namaz is qabul, if I just pray properly, then it doesn't matter what else I do. And it should be obvious that that's clearly not the case. But perhaps what the A'imma alayhimus salam are probably trying to get us to understand is that, look, if a person is paying attention to the most important type of ibadah in Islam, which is arguably salah, then that would mean everything else would fall in line too. Where would you find somebody, for example, that really focuses on waking up for Fajr, they pray Dhuhr and Asr on time, waqtul fadila, Maghrib Isha, they make sure they pray properly, they have hudur al-qalb, presence of heart there, they pay attention to all the fiqhi intricacies, right? So everything's there. Is that same individual going to be lazy or lackadaisical and just kind of negligent in all their other things? It doesn't really make sense. Would can you imagine somebody that really focuses on their prayer, but let's say doesn't fast in Ramadan, or doesn't worry about going to Hajj, or doesn't pay their khums, or whatever it is? And it doesn't seem to make sense. So perhaps, according to some of our ulama, this is talking about a principle that one of the first things that we should be spending our time on perfecting is our salah. And if we do that, we'll see that Allah will put everything else in line for us, right? The rest of our life will come into this kind of spiritual organization. And we've heard this, I think, in other lectures before that, salah has this ability to really systematize and organize our life, right? Because it has all these specific timings, whether you do it 3 times or you decide to separate it, so it's 5 times, which according to most maraja is mustahab to do, that can really give somebody focus in their lives. If you're really spending 5 times out of your day dedicated to Allah,
right? Then that must mean those times in between are also going to be dedicated to Allah. So it stands to reason that this individual, if their salah is going to be accepted by Allah, then everything else should be accepted too. Because naturally, they're going to be performing everything else, hopefully to that same standard. Or at the very least, Allah will provide them the tawfiq so that they could be performing their other ibadat as well. So it does not mean, as far as our ulama have mentioned, that you can just pray, make sure that's accepted, and then just disregard all of your other duties. No, we don't have anything like that. So the second question is it true that if someone doesn't go for 3 consecutive Jum'ah prayers without a valid reason, then Allah will take away their iman? So there are a few narrations which talk about the importance of Jum'ah prayers, right? And from 2 different perspectives. Some talk about it in terms of the power of Jum'ah itself and the reason behind it. And then the other ones will talk about, they'll be in this sort of language where if you don't, then XYZ will happen. So like most other concepts like this, we know that Jum'ah, according to the majority of Maraji, is not wajib in the ghaiba of the imam. According to some, it might be mustahab, but at the very least we have takhir. We can choose between dhuhr or you can go and pray Jum'ah. So our ulama, when they look at these sort of ahadith which talk about this and are very, very strong in their wording, right? So there are some like this that Allah will remove somebody's iman. There are other ones where if a person doesn't go, I think this one, if I'm not mistaken, comes from the first Imam, alayhi salam, and he says that if a person misses 3 Jum'ah prayers, then they will have nifaq grow in their heart. So we have very strong language there. But our ulama come and they explain, say, look, when we have these narrations, again, we have to make sure we don't take them out of context. The context that they're explaining this in is when the Jum'ah is a wajib thing to perform. When we're in an Islamic government, right? We have a socio-political context because that's the main function of Jum'ah prayers. Yes, a lot of us have, established it, in our home countries where we are now, right? Outside of these Islamic or Muslim countries. And that's fine. But these same narrations, according to whatever ulama, their explanations of these ahadith, whichever ones I had taken a look at, nobody had taken that exact same meaning and said that it applies right now in the time of ghaiba. Because obviously, now imagine, in the time when there's an imam present, when there's a leader present, and somebody does not go to Jum'ah prayer, which is basically, the Muslim town hall meeting every week, right? That's how it's designed. First khutbah, right? Designed to remind people about taqwa, and second one about local issues, right? That's how the khutbah is supposed to be. So for somebody in an Islamic country, in an Islamic society, that's their weekly town hall meeting, to get that reminder and to also make sure they understand what's going on in their local society. So if somebody is not going there, right, again, given this context where it's wajib, you have a leader who's addressing all of these things, then yes, perhaps these sort of ideas would apply. But again, the idea is without a valid reason, right? The imam is saying it here himself. As long as you have a valid reason, then it's fine. What's the valid reason? The valid reason right now is the Ahlul Bayt have given us the option to not pray in the Asr al-Ghaiba. We have the option of praying Dhuhr or Jummah. So if you decide to pray Dhuhr at home or whatever, then you'd be excused from this a punishment, the spiritual punishment that is being mentioned in these sort of narrations. So I hope that clarifies the issue, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now, if you all recall, before the month of Ramadan, we had been going through a series of discussions on the topic of Mahdawiyah. And the first point was to talk about what are some of the objections to our understanding of believing in a savior, of an imam of the time who's living. What are some of the issues that non-Muslims will bring up, or even our brothers and sisters of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah? Issues that they will come and they'll bring up and say, look, you have to answer this for us if you want us to believe what you're talking about. If you want us to understand your understanding of having a present imam that's alive. So we started going one by one through different objections, and then we replied to each and every one of them using different methods. Sometimes we stuck to rational, logical ideas. We applied Quranic principles. We talked about history. And we even gave scientific evidence where it applied. One of the remaining questions that's there that some people ask, and again, this is not just for non-Muslims, not just for Sunnis, but even many Shias still have these questions in their hearts right now. And it's a good idea for us to attempt and try to answer these. So people have this idea, okay, we understand now all these principles in history, in the ahadith of Sunni and Shia, in the Quran. We get it that there's a living imam. Okay. And we understand that the imam went into ghaiba. Let's say we understand that too. And he is the only one, through these various reasons, he's the only one that can come and lead mankind to victory. Lead us to that utopian civilization. We understand this. Okay, fine. But somebody can respond and say, why is there a delay? If the imam is supposed to come and lead and save all of mankind from death, destruction, poverty, injustice, well, it's present now, definitely. But it was present back then during the time of all of the imams, especially during the time of the 12th imam, in his ghaibat al-sughra and after the ghaibat al-sughra. So why wouldn't the imam just come back right after his ghaibat al-sughra? Why this longer kubra? Why this long delay? What's the point? If the idea is the imam supposed to guide and lead and break mankind out of the shackles of oppression, well, they were being oppressed then. Is there any valid reason why it's been delayed so long? Now again, somebody might think like, hey, maybe you're just making up excuses. Your whole point, Shias, was that the imam is supposed to save everybody when things got really bad. Well, they were very bad back then. And the imam didn't come back. Maybe now you just keep talking about this long delay and making up all these excuses because in reality, your whole belief about this imam is actually false, and you're just, you're being arrogant and ignorant about that, and you are being stubborn. And you're just making up all these sort of excuses. You're reading too much into the Quran or the Hadith, and this belief doesn't exist. So this is a serious issue that we have to try to answer. How can we reply to somebody, right? Somebody can easily respond and say, look, we know that the imam needs supporters. The imam obviously needs supporters, right? What's the point of a leader coming out and trying to lead people if there's nobody to lead? We gave this example last night as well. We know that when Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, when he wanted to take back his divinely given right of khilafah, which was his, right? Mentioned over and over again in the Quran, mentioned over and over again by Rasulullah during his lifetime. When Imam Ali was ready to take it back after Saqifa, he said, look, it's no problem. I just need supporters. I can't just go out on my own and, slaughter everybody and, kind of have this coup d'etat. It's not going to work like that. I need supporters to help me. And he gave specific instructions. According to some narrations, he said, meet me at the masjid at Fajr time. Some say before, some say after Fajr time, various narrations. And he said, come with your head shaved. So people ask, why would he tell them to shave their head? Well, imagine we wanted to set up some special program and I wanted to test out all of you. And I said, okay, I need people to, wear a red shirt with white stripes to come in to show me that you're a supporter, for example. So, and you come at Fajr time. So if I come and I see everybody that's here, if I see that there's all these people with, a red shirt and white stripes, that'll tell me that they're actually a supporter, right? If you see somebody else randomly coming in who just happens to wear a red shirt and white stripes, you should be able to tell that, they don't belong here, something doesn't make sense. So they say that this idea of shaving of the head was actually something deeper behind it. What the reasons are is there's bigger discussions there. I don't want to get into that. But usually for every imam, when they're looking for their shi'as, there are specific alamat, there are specific signs that those shi'as should show and should have. So some that we know right now are aqiqs that we wear on our right hand. Because we know nobody else would wear it on the right hand. Now, you might have some individual. I remember I forgot where I was, but some random individual at one of these stores was, they looked at my ring, they said, oh wow, I admire your cornelian ring, right? And I think they happen to have something like that on their right hand too. Now, usually when you and I see that, we immediately think, oh, they must be Shia, right? But no, it is possible that you have somebody who is, into New Age spirituality and they like stones and rings and things like that, and that's why they might be wearing it. So these sort of signs are one amongst many other signs. So the Imam is saying, shave your heads, come to the masjid, and there was a few other things he mentioned. Come there, and if there's enough individuals, then we can go and take my right back. But as we know our history, unfortunately, only a handful of individuals showed up. Some narrations say 5, some say 7, some say 10. Can you imagine trying to lead a revolution with 5, 7, 10 people against tribes and tribes and tribes? No, it wasn't going to happen. So if a person wants to lead a populist movement, they need supporters, they need the populace. In the same way, people would respond and say, look, The reason why there's a delay is because the Imam had no supporters. There was no network. Even if there might have been individuals during the time of the 12th Imam, let's say there were individuals that were there, but they were scattered out all over the place. Maybe he had a handful in Basra, maybe a handful in Kufa, a few in Medina, a couple in Mecca, but there was no link between them. How would they connect, with one another? Right now, let's say the Imam returns right now, we have an ability to communicate with each other instantly. So we could actually, connect with our support and mobilize people right away if we wanted to. But did that system exist instantaneously like that? No. So some people would say, see, because of that, because of the lack of support, the lack of networking, this is why there had to be a delay, and that's why, things have to develop right now, and this time makes more sense, perhaps, for the Imam of the time to return. This is a response that I'm sure that many of you have heard before. But there's a problem with this response. What's the problem? I'll tell you after. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So a person responds to the objection of the delay, saying that, look, the Imam didn't have supporters, that's why there's a delay, because we have to wait for all the supporters to be there. The response is this: there was a network of supporters existing at that time. All the way from the time of the 7th Imam up until the 12th Imam. There was a network of supporters, of Shias, that were all interconnected. Now, yeah, obviously they didn't have, direct messages that they could have gotten instantly, but the messages were strong enough where they could have sent things out to one another very, very quickly. And this is something known as the Wikala system that was existing from that time. So they did have support. Shias were there. Leadership was there. If it wasn't there, then where would all the Shias have gotten all this information in the Ghaibat al-Sughra? The Ghaibat al-Sughra is a response to, this sort of typical response. The Ghaibat al-Sughra proves that there was a strong support system for the Imam back then. They had leadership, and they had people following that leadership. And there was no issues. So why wouldn't the Imam just, come back after the Ghaibat al-Sughra and pick up where the 4 Nawa'ib left off? He could have done that, couldn't he? The Wikala system was there. And for anybody who's interested, there are some lectures online, and I can send you the links for that talk more about the Wikala system of the last 3 or 4 Imams. So somebody might say, okay, even if there was this Wikala system, this support system, no problem. But the Imam is only going to rise up. He can only do it when victory is certain. What's the point of the Imam coming back, even if he has a bunch of Shias ready and a network ready, if the system of oppression that exists is so strong that they would wipe out all the Shias, or at least wipe out the Imam? There would be no point. The idea is that we want the Imam to return, to lead, and to set up a proper utopian civilization and a government, right? That's the idea. We want him to be alive for that. If he comes back and, gives a few speeches, gives some nice khutbahs, and then is, assassinated right away, what's the point? That's not really going to do anything for us. It might motivate us a little bit, but we need his divine leadership. We've seen what happens with fallible leadership over time. Even those Muslims, even Shias, these Shia governments that exist, even with the best intentions, they still, make mistakes. It's going to happen. With a ma'soom in charge, a ma'soom picking, according to some narrations, ma'soomin leading the various provinces and parts of the government, then that would, exponentially minimize the type of poverty or oppression or crime that would take place, right? That's the idea. Utopia in, the greatest sense. That's the idea we're talking about. So people would, again, respond, say, that's why there's a delay. The delay is because there was so much oppression back then. Now we're waiting for that right time when you have a good mix of supporters of a networking system, and they're strong enough to fight against the oppressive systems that exist, so that the Imam can thrive, and the Shias and all those who follow the Imam at that time, they can thrive as well. So you know what I'm going to say. There's a response to that too. So what's that response? Again, we'll recite it after another. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If we're being really honest, and those I think who know their Islamic history, they should know these things already. What empires or what systems do you think are stronger? The ones that existed back then, or the ones that exist right now? Which empires, governments, and countries are more oppressive, are more blatant in their oppression? The ones right now or the ones back then? Now, right now, we can clearly see what's happening, between the Palestinians and the Zionist occupation forces. Clear, blatant death, destruction, occupation, oppression. And alhamdulillah, people are standing up and they're speaking out against it. But can anybody do anything in the face of the Zionist regime besides speaking out? Especially when they're being funded by all these other oppressive governments. What can we do? Even when so-called Islamic, which shouldn't be used for these countries, these Muslim majority countries are sending their money, their funds, and their weapons to the Zionist countries. This is the stage that we're living in right now. So I think it's very clear that governments right now are very oppressive, very harsh, and the amount of propaganda that exists is so much so. It's a lot. There are still individuals who exist in this country, sometimes even within Muslim circles. Unfortunately, there are even Shias right now who are not on the side of the Palestinians for some reason. Right? And they make up, they just kind of repeat the lines that are created by the Zionist propaganda machine. It's unfortunate, but that's what happens sometimes. Now, compare all the oppressive governments that exist right now. Compare these groups like Daesh and the Taliban, right? Al-Qaeda, all these, insane, inhumane groups. Compare them to the governments that existed at that time. Now, were they perfect during the time of the, last few imams? No, of course not. The Abbasid regime was deadly, definitely. But did they have that same sort of power and sort of vicious intent and, rage and engaging in the sort of impression that is, being employed right now? Without a doubt, it's night and day, completely different. In fact, during the time of the 11th, or more so during the time of the 12th Imam, we are switching to a different empire, right? So this is moving over to the Buyid Empire. The Buyid Empire were Shia-friendly. And they pretty much controlled the Abbasid Empire. Right? The Abbasid Empire was basically an extension of the Buyid Empire. And I don't want to go into the history of it, but whoever's interested, go and just look at the Wikipedia entry of the Buyid Empire and what they did. These are all Shia-friendly individuals who were running the provinces. Wouldn't that have been the best time for the Imam to come back? You have all these individuals who are now Shia-friendly, Shias basically telling the Abbasids what to do and what not to do. Wouldn't that have made sense for the Imam to come then? It was easy. It was ripe for the taking. But we see the Imam didn't. So this excuse or analogy that's used that, no, the oppression, it has to be in such a way where the Imam, his victory is going to be assured. And the Shias can support him, or the people who want to support the Imam can support him, and he'll win. Well, it seems like he could have won back then. Probably much easier than he could have right now. There is no Abbasids that would have been able to drop nuclear bombs. No nuclear submarines. No, machine guns or, bunker buster missiles or things like that. The amount of death and destruction through the technology that exists today definitely didn't exist then. And it was just swords and archery and things like that. It seems like it would have been, it's much more chivalrous, as we say. The combat was much more chivalrous. Well, right now, that sort of modern combat and warfare doesn't really exist. It seems like it's much more difficult right now. So why in the world would this excuse stand up? It doesn't seem like that would work as well. And there's another response that somebody might give. They say, look, you keep saying that, the support system needs to be like this for the Imam. The conditions need to be like this. The Imam needs so-and-so individuals. The oppressors need to be like this. X, Y, Z. We keep saying this needs to be like this. That way the Imam can return. Now, somebody might respond and say, look, hold on. Don't you believe in Allah? Don't you believe in God who's in charge of everything? Isn't he independent of all these things? Why are you telling me on one hand that there's a God who is al-Ghani, who's independent? He's wajibul wujud. There's no cause for him. Yaf'al ma yasha. He does whatever he wants at any time. You're telling me that this same God, this same Allah that you believe in, who is decreed that there be 124,000 prophets and 14 ma'asumin and this whole system, this same God that can do all of these things and create this whole world, anything that he wants, now he's saying, well, I need to wait to send down my final representative until you guys figure a few things out, until this system of oppression changes or Shias get their act together. God is waiting for all this? Somebody who might hear this, especially, certain other Muslims, they might laugh at an idea like this. Like, what do you mean God is waiting for this stuff? If God is seeing that we need an Imam to come back, why wouldn't he just send him back right away? What is the delay? Why does God need to wait for anything at all? So this is another question that we're going to have to answer. And if we think deeply, all of these questions that we've talked about, right? The idea of the Imam support system, the idea of oppressive systems existing or not existing, the idea about people standing up with the Imam, having this wikala system, the idea of God and needs and causes and effects, all of these things, the real question behind all of this is just one. All of these other ones we talked about are just extensions, they're corollaries. But there's one root question that really lies behind all of this. And that is, do we really understand the concept of hikmah, of divine wisdom? Do we really understand how and why Allah does things in different times and different places? If we can get a hold of this idea of divine wisdom, then everything else, all these other questions and issues and doubts will all fall into place very, very easily. And there's two basic concepts that we'll keep in mind and that we'll continue next week, inshallah. So that I want you all to think about. There's two elements that work in terms of cause and effect. There's two elements that we conceptualize and think about when we're talking about Allah and as the Khaliq and Allah creating things, the makhluk, the cosmos, the universe, everything else. The first is Allah, the Khaliq, who is independent of all things. But on the other hand, everything which we say is ma siwallah, everything else besides, other than Allah, this is the realm of dependency. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhan nas, antum al-fuqara ilallah. Hey humans, you are fuqara ilallah. You are completely in need, completely impoverished. In every single facet of your life, you are in need of Allah. And this doesn't just work for humans, this is for every single thing that exists. If we can understand this, on one hand, Allah being independent, at the same side, everything that's created is dependent. If we can wrap our heads around these two ideas and figure out how does an independent being make all these dependent things, how does cause and effect work, and how does this allow us to understand time and place and change and divine wisdom and all of this, then that will give us a better understanding and a tool so that we can figure out why exactly Allah needs to delay the ghaibah of the Imam of the time. So this, inshallah, we will continue next Thursday. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We just want to recite a few words of musibah, masa'ib for our beloved marhuma, Zainab Kaki, or Anna Irina Kaki. Since she was named Zainab, it's only fitting that we speak about our beloved Bibi. We know that Bibi Zainab is known as Ummul Masa'ib. And I'm sure many of you have heard different muballighin and ulama explain why Bibi Zainab is Ummul Masa'ib. Sometimes when they explain that she's the mother of musibah, she's the mother of gham, the mother of bala and tragedy, they say it's because she went through more than anybody else. They say, she was the one who was subject to all the travels from Medina to Makkah, from Makkah all the way towards Kufa, towards outside of Kufa to Karbala. And most others, they had that same journey. But for hers, it was added, right? Because now she goes from Karbala back to Kufa, from Kufa to Sham, from Sham and back to Medina. So they say that her bala, her journey was longer than everybody else's. So this is what makes her Ummul Masa'ib. Others say, yes, there was this longer journey that she took. She did undertake that, and it was very tough for her. But there was something that she did that others didn't. Because obviously, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam and the other children that were there, they also went through this. They had that same long journey as well. But they're not known as or Abul Musa'ib in that sense. So they say, okay, well, maybe it's because perhaps Sayyid Zainab was the one who was taking care of everyone. She was the one taking care of the women from the beginning up until the end. She was the one taking care of the children from the beginning to the end. Even the one who was taking care of Imam Sajjad from beginning till end. So some ulama say that's why she's Ummul Masa'ib. Perhaps there's another reason. And perhaps the reason she's called al-Masa'ib, I think we can understand if we focus on the word on the idea of her being the mother of Masa'ib. What do we think about when we think about mothers? A mother that is a mu'mina, a muhsina, mutadayyina, muttaqiyya, is somebody who takes others' burdens on their own shoulders. Whereas usually men, husbands, fathers, they come back from work, they have all this stress, they're the ones who require relaxation. They're calming down. They need to take care of themselves. They're unable to take all these extra burdens. But it's the mother, the wife, the who's able to take on those extra burdens. She wants to create that sense of sukoon and sakina in the household. She takes on the burdens and the stress and anxiety of her own children. She takes on the burden and stress of her own parents. She takes on the burden, the responsibilities of her community as well. This is what makes somebody an and a mother. And perhaps this is why she's al-Masa'ib, because every single musibah that took place from Medina to Mecca, to Karbala, to Sham, back to Medina, every single burden and bala she took on her own shoulders. And her own musibah, she was silent about. In Karbala, when she is witnessing all of this death, all of this tragedy, when her two children, Aun and Muhammad, are killed in front of her, what mother wouldn't want to go and cry at their feet right away? What mother wouldn't drop and fall at their bodies and begin crying? When Umar ibn Sa'd takes the women through the battlefield, and when she passes by and sees what death and devastation has occurred, does she fall? Does she break down? No, she's al-Masa'ib. She falls to the body of Hussein, and her musibah is taking on the burden of the family of Hussein. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا هَذَا الْقُرْبَانِ. She cries at the body of Hussein. As she continues on to Kufa, she stands up. She protects Imam Sajjad, although she's also being whipped, just like Imam Sajjad. Everybody else is being whipped as well, but she is protecting Sakina. She's protecting Sajjad. This is al-Masa'ib. She continues all the way to Sham, and she stands up and speaks out against Yazid with all of those scars there. She is the one taking part in the janazah, the ghusl, everything for Sakina. All of this, she's taking on these responsibilities without letting out one sigh of impatience. Finally now, when she returns back to Medina, when she comes back to her home, when Abdullah ibn Ja'far can't recognize this old lady at her door, when she finally comes in and now she's ready as a mother to finally breathe that breath, that sigh of relief, to be home finally, to come back to her own home. When she wants to walk in to the room where her aunt and Muhammad used to be, now, as many mothers do, when she wants to now release and unload now, this al-Masa'ib comes back as a mother. She looks at these tiny musallas of aunt and Muhammad perhaps, and now finally she begins to cry, wa auna wa Muhammada. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Ya Allah, we ask you by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, by the right of this majalis, the azah that was performed today and tonight, we ask you to forgive all mu'mineen mu'minat, especially our beloved marhuma, Zainab, Anna Irina Kaki. We ask you to give her a high, elevated station with the ma'asumeen alayhimu salatu wassalam. And we ask you to help us learn from her example and to make us those who follow in the example of Bibi Zainab alayhi salatu wassalam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala Ahl Bayt Tayyibin Tahirin. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمديه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. أزور سيدي ومولاي ومعتمدي ورجائي دخري وذخيرتي في آخرتي ودنياي الإمام الحسين عليه السلام زيارة مني ونيابة عن والدي وعن إخواني وأخواتي وعن جميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات قربتان إلى الله تعالى. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وأتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المتحرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي والهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. واشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرع ديني وخواتم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى جسادكم وعلى جسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه. السلام عليكم يا أسفياء الله ووداءه. السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصح. السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم والله فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبو الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن السيد الوسيين. السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم الإسلام وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأخوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدعوف ونخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل. والحقق الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا شارد الشموت لا إله إلا الله السلطان أبا الحسن مولانا علي بن موسى الرضا. كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله لك ما وعدك من النصر وظهور العام جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. الفاتحة مع الصلوات.